Warning. In this video, we will put God on trial, examining his actions and determining guilt or innocence. We will draw from sources of scientific, historical, and archaeological information. If you fear questioning your deepest truths, I must warn you that this video is not for you. This video is intense and must be watched from beginning to end to avoid any misjudgment of its content. Are you ready? Then let the trial begin. Throughout the ages, we have sought solace and answers in the divine, in the form of the God we find in the sacred scriptures of the Bible. Amongst many, the Bible is revered as the sacred conduit to the divine intelligence, a celestial gift bestowed upon the realm of humankind. This holy manuscript, an unrivaled bestseller throughout the known world, resonates with millions, promising a glimpse into the mind of an entity known as God, the supreme architect of all there is. The heavens, the earth, the stars, the myriad creatures, and of course, humanity itself. The cosmic order seems impeccably constructed, a grand design of perfect harmony. Yet a veil of enigma shrouds the Bible when one dares to venture deeper into its labyrinthine passages. Hidden within the text lie chilling tales of divine wrath and moral paradoxes that confound our modern sensibilities. Consider the chilling divine test of Abraham's faith, a demand for the unthinkable, the sacrifice of his own son Isaac, or the apocalyptic obliteration of Sodom and Gomorrah, their histories forever lost to the sand of time. These are but fragments of a more complex narrative that paints an uncanny portrait of the biblical God, a side seldom unveiled to the world. The God of the Old Testament, particularly in the foundational texts known as the Pentateuch, emerges not just as a divine creator, but as a formidable entity whose raw, awe-inspiring power commands both reverence and dread. This, one could argue, is a deity to be approached not merely with love, but with a profound sense of trepidation. The question then arises, what other secrets lie hidden within the sacred scriptures, awaiting discovery? If we attempt to analyze the actions of the God of the Bible in depth, we will find profound discrepancies and moral problems. It is possible to consider this a major issue when considering Judeo-origin religions, such as Judaism and Christianity. If God were entirely good, why would there be such controversial information and actions? Let's delve into a more specific analysis, considering some events from the Bible itself. Let's begin, more specifically from the beginning. Not from the beginning of all things, but from the creation of humans. First, in Genesis 1:26, God creates humans. Then on Genesis 1:28-30, he grants them dominion over the animal and plant kingdoms. Next, in Genesis 2:8, he places them in the Garden of Eden. After, in Genesis 2:18-22, he creates woman so that man won't feel alone. Next, he forbids men and women from eating from the tree of good and evil in Genesis 2:17. Later, in Genesis 3:8-9, God searched for Adam in Eden, which is surprising because if God knows what goes in man's heart, why would he need to look for him? Afterward, on Genesis 3:11, God doesn't even seem to know that Adam has eaten the fruit of the tree, and he questions Adam about it. Then God punishes Adam and Eve for eating fruits from the forbidden tree on Genesis 3:15-19. Later on, God makes garments for Adam and Eve in Genesis 3:21. Then God states that man has become like one of them, knowing good and evil, and to prevent man from eating from the tree of life and gaining eternal life, God expels man from the Garden of Eden. This part can be read on Genesis 3:23. In this part we can see something very strange, because we can read that God, one single deity, pronunciates it in plural when states that he, Adam, had become on of them. Finally, in Genesis 3:24, God protects the Garden of Eden from the actions of man. Soon after, God allows Adam and Eve to have children, and thus Cain and Abel are born. God then allows them to have different occupations on Genesis 4:1-2. Next, God is pleased with one brother's offering, but not the others, as it can be read on Genesis 4:4-5. After that, God grants himself the right to question why Cain is angry for not having his offering accepted on Genesis 4:6. Consequently, God punishes and curses Cain for killing Abel in Genesis 4:9-12. After, on Genesis 4:13-14, God hears Cain's plea for mercy and subsequently blesses him in Genesis 4:15. Afterward, God regrets having made man like on Genesis 6:6. But one man, Noah, pleases God, for he was a righteous man in Genesis 6:8-9. Then God sends the great flood on Genesis 7:12, but remembers Noah and the ark in Genesis 8:1. In response to the sweet aroma of Noah's offering, God promises in his heart not to curse the earth because of man again in Genesis 8:25. These events demonstrate the contradictory actions of the God presented to us in the Bible as the only God, the creator of the heavens and earth, and provide us a glimpse of a contradictory and problematic deity. But I have to remind you that, obviously, we are not the first to observe these problems. In modern times, we must turn to an individual who has been critically examining this enigma. That person is the renowned biologist and professor, Richard Dawkins. Born in Nairobi, British Kenya, Dawkins has dedicated his life to the pursuit of understanding the complexity of life through the lens of science. As an emeritus fellow of New College, Oxford, and the former professor for public understanding of science in the University of Oxford, Dawkins has built a significant body of work that challenges the concept of divine creation and champions a gene-centered view of evolution. This includes the popularization of the concept of the meme and advocacy for a scientific understanding of our world, in stark contrast to religious dogma. In his controversial work, The God Delusion, Dawkins presents a provocative critique of the deity of the Old Testament. He describes this character as the following: the most unpleasant character in all of fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Dawkins argues that religion is often the opposite of what it claims to be, and may even be at the root of much of the evil we see in the world. From his childhood in Nairobi, Dawkins was raised in an environment that fostered curiosity in the natural sciences, leading him to question the teachings of the Anglican Church he was brought up in. His shift from a religious believer to an atheist was heavily influenced by his realization that evolution provided a more compelling explanation for life's complexity than divine creation. this exploration of the world and life through a scientific lens has shaped Dawkins' worldview and his approach to religious critique. For Dawkins, religion is the antithesis of what it purports to be. He argues that religion is the root of all evil. I know that this is a strong statement and phrase. Personally, I partially agree with it. From my point of view, if we know how to use religion to connect with the divine that resides within ourselves and in every aspect of life, then we have made good use of religion. However, it is important to note that religion has spurred numerous atrocities throughout history. This is because the sacred texts themselves contain conflicting messages, with confusing stories that mix love and hate, healing and illness, blessing and curse. From this perspective, I agree with Dawkins when it comes to religion being the root of all evil. Additionally, it is important to remember that religions, for the most part, each claim to possess the exclusive knowledge of truth and the only secure source of salvation towards eternity. Now let's pause all reflections for a moment. I need to clarify something for you that have arrived at this video and this channel. The subject analyzed in greater depth on this channel is Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian, and Mesopotamian mythology in a general sense. I also need to remind you that the ancient astronaut theory is taken seriously. However, I ask for you, who are already familiar with this subject, to follow the entire discussion that will be presented here. This is because in the journey of this documentary, we are starting from the examination and analysis of the God of the Bible, the supreme deity of the largest religious following on planet Earth, Christianity. From there, and through a thorough analysis of the recent discoveries of biblical archaeology, we will deconstruct the image of the singular God associated with the name Yahweh. In this sense, I want to make it clear that I, Lucas, the person behind this channel, do not promote or endorse hatred towards any religion. On the contrary, I advocate peace and harmonious coexistence among the different religions and belief systems on the planet. Furthermore, I also advocate for approaching religion and faith not from the blind prism of worshiping sacred and dogmatic scriptures, but from a logical and coherent perspective based on recent historical and archaeological discoveries. It is precisely this approach that will lead us to deconstruct this image and understand that what lies behind the name of the biblical God and the angels of the Old Testament are, in fact, aliens who visited us in our distant and ancient past. Personally, I do believe in God as an energy, a force, a state of consciousness and divine presence that dwells within each of us. And this kind of divine entity does not seem, at least in my personal opinion, to have anything in common with the characteristics of the God presented in the Bible, as he is the result of a misinterpretation of ancient mythologies and scriptures. Furthermore, in this interruption, two important observations are worth noting. The first one is that Judaism is a religious tradition that accepts the existence of other gods, but considers the deity that revealed himself to Abraham as the supreme I Am. For Judaism, Yahweh defines it as, I am that I am, or I am who I am, or I will become what I choose to become, or I am what I am, or I will be what I will be. This idea, this statement with which Yahweh identifies himself, is precisely what leads to the notion that he, Yahweh, is the all-powerful and unique God, identified with the divine whole. The second important observation is that personally, I consider the message attributed to the religious figure of Jesus more important than the controversies surrounding everything associated with his name. In this regard, I have the utmost respect for the teachings left by this great master, just as I have for other great masters who had lived on earth, such as Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, for example. Regarding the dogmatic issues surrounding the name of Jesus, I believe that they can be questioned, just like any other questions that may arise in the realm of religious faith, and I consider it essential to examine them in light of new scientific discoveries. After this lengthy interlude, we will return to the observation we were making earlier, the judgment of God. And to examine more closely everything that involves the name of the biblical God, we will engage with another profound critic and modern scholar, Sam Harris. Born on April 9, 1967, in Los Angeles, California, Samuel Benjamin Harris is an American philosopher, neuroscientist, author, and podcast host. He is renowned for his work on a variety of topics, including rationality, religion, ethics, free will, neuroscience, meditation, psychedelics, philosophy of mind, politics, terrorism, and artificial intelligence. Harris is notable for his criticism of religion and is known as one of the four horsemen of New Atheism, along with Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett. Harris's first book, The End of Faith, won the Penn Martha Albrand Award for First Nonfiction and remained on the New York Times bestseller list for 33 weeks. He has since written 6 more books, including Letter to a Christian Nation, The Moral Landscape, How Science Can Determine Human Values, Free Will, and Waking Up, A Guide to Spirituality Without Religion. Harris has engaged in debates on topics such as God and religion with many prominent figures, including William Lane Craig, Jordan Peterson, Rick Warren, and Ben Shapiro, among others. An excellent material for analysis is the debate that took place at the University of Notre Dame between Sam Harris and William Lane Craig, titled The God Debate. The debate lasts over 2 hours, and the link to watch this debate is provided in the video description. Now, let's examine together an excerpt from Sam Harris's speech in this debate. Sam Harris Discourse, exploring the contradiction inherent in the concept of a merciful, all-powerful God in the face of the world's immense suffering, particularly that of children. He presents a harrowing image of millions of children dying painfully each year, raising profound questions about the nature of a God who would permit such suffering despite the desperate prayers of grieving parents. He scrutinizes the theology suggesting this appalling reality is part of a divine plan, and contends that such a God, if unable or unwilling to prevent such suffering, must be either impotent or inherently evil. This argument takes a darker turn as Harris confronts the concept of eternal damnation for those who, often through no fault of their own, pray to the wrong God. He critiques this belief for its lack of empirical evidence, challenging the justification of such a dire, eternal consequence based purely on religious doctrine. Sam Harris raises significant concerns about the apparent absence of moral accountability within the Christian framework. He illustrates this concept through a stark example, pointing out that a lifelong serial killer could supposedly gain eternal happiness simply by accepting Jesus Christ on their deathbed. This he contrasts with the fate of countless innocent victims, underscoring the inherent injustice of this theological belief. Harris exposed perceived double standards among the faithful. He highlights how believers often ascribe positive events in their lives to God's benevolence, attributing any personal success or happiness to divine intervention. In stark contrast, however, they readily dismiss God's role in the widespread pain and suffering in the world as an inscrutable mystery, effectively absolving the deity of any responsibility for these instances of cruelty and injustice. The speech also critiques the divine command theory, a theological doctrine that posits anything God commands is intrinsically good. This theory, he argues, fosters a disturbingly delusional and detached moral attitude. It allows believers to rationalize heinous actions, including child slaughter, on the basis that they're divinely ordained. This critique highlights Harris's contention that many religious doctrines can be manipulated to justify gross atrocities, further undermining the moral validity of such beliefs. Harris confronts the considerable burden of belief placed on followers by the implausible doctrines of Christianity. He raises questions about the logic of a system of salvation that demands faith in God, despite a lack of convincing evidence. With a critical lens, Harris examines the inherent contradiction in this expectation, especially considering the decline in miraculous interventions as compared to biblical times. Harris goes on to express his disdain for the core tenet of Christianity, which celebrates the sacrifice of Jesus Christ as the ultimate act of divine love. He criticizes this belief as a grotesque celebration of human sacrifice, a moral inversion that fails to consider the implications for the billions who do not subscribe to Christianity. Harris links these religious doctrines to a disturbing history of scientific ignorance and religious barbarism. He recounts instances of inhumane practices carried out under the guise of pleasing divine entities, such as burying children alive in foundations to secure divine favor for the building's longevity. In concluding his speech, Harris makes an emphatic assertion about the moral framework proposed by religious theists. He categorically states his view that no moral framework is less moral than the one these religious doctrines propose, emphasizing his firm belief in the moral flaws and contradictions inherent in such beliefs. His argument is a powerful critique of religious doctrines that, in his view, often lead to more harm than good. After analyzing what Sam Harris had said, we need to ask ourselves, why do so many people around the world believe in this God, specifically the God of the Bible, as the only and true God? If so many people believe that the Bible is a gift from God, why does this gift contain so many controversies? Perhaps we can find an answer by looking not at the Bible itself, but at its origins. To answer this question, we will turn to another book that I've read and studied several years ago. The book is titled The Invention of God by the author Thomas Romer. Thomas Christian Romer, born on December 13, 1955, in Mannheim, is a prominent figure in the realm of biblical scholarship. As a German-born Swiss biblical scholar, exegete, philologist, professor, and Reformed minister, he has contributed significantly to the understanding of the Old Testament and its paradoxes. Fascinated by the Old Testament from an early age, Romer was raised in a devout Protestant family and pursued theological studies out of interest rather than a specific calling. Romer's academic journey led him to study theology and religious studies at the theological faculties of the University of Heidelberg and University of Tübingen from 1974 to 1980. Here he studied Biblical Hebrew, Ugaritic, and other Semitic languages, notably under the guidance of Rolf Rentorf, professor of Old Testament in Heidelberg. Rentorf encouraged Romer to delve into the question of the Jewish patriarchs in the Book of Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomist history. From 1980 to 1982, Romer studied religious studies at the École Pratique des Hautes Études in Paris, where he attended the École Pratique des Hautes Études, the Catholic Institute of Paris, and the Protestant Faculty of Theology in Paris. He received his doctorate in 1988. His doctoral thesis, titled Israel's Vader, combined structuralist and historico-critical approaches. The work was a continuation of John Van Sater's studies, focusing on the contentious aim of Deuteronomy's editors against specific Judean circles, and the theory that the Pentateuch resulted from an attempt to reconcile two factions within post-Babylonian exile. His thesis was innovative, suggesting that the fathers mentioned in Deuteronomy were those of the Exodus, not the patriarchs. and that the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did not appear in Deuteronomy until the final writing and editing of the Pentateuch. After his studies, Romer began his professional journey, teaching at the University of Geneva. He later became a professor of the Old Testament at the University of Lausanne. Since 2007, Romer has held the chair Biblical Environments at the Collège de France, a prestigious research establishment in France, where he became an administrator in 2019. Throughout his career, Romer has been recognized for his academic contributions, earning an honorary doctorate from Tel Aviv University in 2015, the Prix d'Histoire des Religions in 2014, and being named Knight of the Legion of Honor in 2019. The Invention of God by Thomas Romer is a comprehensive exploration that uncovers the mysteries behind the origination and evolution of the supreme deity in major monotheistic religions, Yahweh, God, or Allah. Romer embarks on a scholarly quest tracing back to the Bronze Age, extending through to the Old Testament era that ends in the 3rd century BCE. The audacity of such an endeavor might be startling to some, given the complex and enigmatic nature of the subject matter. Nevertheless, Romer asserts that an abundance of evidence, coupled with rigorous historical, philological, and exegetical research, makes it possible to construct a reliable account of the genesis and development of the God of Israel. His findings are further substantiated by recent breakthroughs in archaeology and epigraphy. The origins of Yahweh, as per Romer's investigations, date back to the early Iron Age. The deity is believed to have surfaced either in Edom or in the northwestern region of the Arabian Peninsula, initially revered as a god of the wilderness, storms, and war. Over time, amidst a tumultuous spiritual landscape, Yahweh ascended to become the sole deity of Israel and Jerusalem. This transition was marked by intermittent successes and regressions, with other deities like the mother goddess Asherah gradually losing their prominence. It was only in the wake of a profound catastrophe, the destruction of Jerusalem and Judah, that the Israelites began to venerate Yahweh as the singular God of all, the creator of heaven and earth, who nonetheless declared a unique affiliation with Judaism. Romer's work, a masterstroke of investigative scholarship and exposition, shines a spotlight on questions of tremendous importance that seldom receive the attention they deserve. His contributions offer enlightening insights into the origins of a deity that has profoundly shaped human culture and history. As one of the world's preeminent experts on the Hebrew Bible, Romer's book, The Invention of God, stands as a testament to his scholarly depth and dedication. On one of the first pages of the book, Romer conveys a very clear piece of information. When we read the Jewish and Christian Bibles, as well as the Quran, we get the impression that this God has always been there, as he is the creator of heaven and earth. But looking closer, we find texts that admit the existence of other gods, as in the story of the conflict between a certain Jephthah, a military leader of an Israelite tribe, and Sicyon, the king of Israel's eastern neighbors, which is reported in the book of Judges. While Judaism, followed by Christianity and Islam, proclaims the unity of a solitary God, reigning alone since eternity over heaven and earth, the Hebrew Bible itself testifies, to those who read it carefully, to its polytheistic roots. In fact, the God of Abraham, referred to by the three religions of the book, each in its own way, was not always unique. Historians and archaeologists are not concerned with the theological and faith implications of the supposed existence of a god. These researchers are interested in the monuments, artifacts, and historical evidence of culture and religion concerning the deities. They categorically state that there was not a single creator God of the heavens and earth as the Bible leads us to believe. They say that Yahweh actually proclaimed himself to be the one true God, usurping the reverence entrusted to other gods. It is well known that the Bible is far from being an original set of books, the result of a miraculous revelation from the mystery of existence. Today, historians and archaeologists understand the Bible differently. The world's most famous set of books is actually a compilation of several other records older than the Bible itself. Serious scholars from all over the world argue that other gods were worshipped in the regions where Yahweh was revered. They claim that the veneration of other gods was gradually prohibited and replaced by the worship of Yahweh, a self-proclaimed one true God. When we look at Yahweh and the Bible, not as a sacred narrative, but as a historical testament of religion, we can see that the Bible itself provides faithful testimony that Yahweh declared himself the one true God. Yahweh sought to diminish the attention given to other gods, even threatening all those who would challenge his power as the one true God and choose to worship other deities. But how could other gods exist? Was there a culture before the Bible where a contact with the gods could be traced? And the answer to this question is yes, there is. In 1849, an archaeologist and historian known as Sir Austen Henry Layard began excavations in the region that is now present-day Iraq. His expeditions were funded by the British Museum, reflecting the British interest in the cultural and historical treasures of the Near East during the Victorian era. At the time of the excavation, Nineveh, located in present-day Mosul, Iraq, was an uncharted archaeological site. Layard made a startling discovery, an entire library that was believed to have belonged to King Ashurbanipal II, containing around 30,000 to 40,000 clay tablets. The ruins of Nineveh were situated on two main mounds, Kuyunjik and Nebi Yunus. Kuyunjik, where the library was discovered, is the larger of the two. Layard and later his assistant Hormuzd Rassam found a large number of rooms filled with clay tablets. These tablets, upon later examination, turned out to be the royal library of King Ashurbanipal, the last great king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. The discovery of the Library of Nineveh provided an unprecedented wealth of knowledge about the ancient world. The library contained a wide range of texts from legal codes and administrative documents to literary works and scholarly treatises. Among the literary works were the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Epic of Creation, both foundational texts of Mesopotamian culture. The library's content reveals the scholarly interests of Ashurbanipal, who was unusual among ancient rulers for his interest in literature and his ability to read and write Akkadian and Sumerian, the languages of the tablets. These clay tablets belong to three civilizations whose histories intertwine: Sumerian, Akkadian, and Assyrian. The tablets provide a wealth of information about the customs and culture of the time. Among the tablets, there are documents on trade, laws, daily life, astronomy, mathematics, mythology, and religion. The clay tablets themselves are remarkable artifacts. Crafted from wet clay and inscribed with a stylus, they were then baked or left to dry in the sun. This technique preserved the tablets for millennia, enabling modern scholars to decipher and understand the complex societies of ancient Mesopotamia. The discoveries at Nineveh sparked a surge of interest in Assyriology, the study of the ancient Assyrian civilization, its language, history, and culture. The clay tablets from the Library of Nineveh are considered one of the greatest archaeological finds of all time, providing unparalleled insights into the civilizations of the ancient Near East. This vast collection of content became known as the Library of Nineveh. It is within the tablets of the Library of Nineveh that we find the most exciting discovery. The first civilization in human history worshipped not a single god but a pantheon of deities known as Anunnaki. These Anunnaki are a group of revered gods and goddesses by the Mesopotamian civilization, the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Assyrians. The Anunnaki are popularly known as those who from heaven came to Earth. They are often referred to as ancient astronauts or extraterrestrial beings. An exponent and expert on this topic is Zecharia Sitchin. According to Sitchin's books, the Anunnaki are said to have first come to Earth 450,000 years ago. The Earth Chronicles series, written by Zecharia Sitchin, offers a fascinating exploration into ancient Sumerian cosmology, suggesting a radical interpretation of humanity's ancient past. Sitchin's series includes the book The Lost Book of Enki, which presents the narrative through the perspective of Enki, an Anunnaki deity. This work elaborates on the Anunnaki's supposed influence on the development of human civilization, their technological prowess, and their interactions with humanity. The book is a riveting exploration of these ancient tales, diving deep into the purported history of these alien visitors, their hierarchies, and their interactions with human beings. For those intrigued by these theories and narratives, you might want to explore the Anunnaki Ancient Mystery Channel, where you can find the Anunnaki movies. These films provide a visual complement to Sitchin's written works, exploring the same intriguing theories about ancient alien civilizations and their potential influence on human history. However, scholars argue that the correct definition of the term Anunnaki is the offspring of the princely ones, the descendants or children of the god Anu. Mainstream historians and archaeologists states that Sitchin had misinterpreted the Mesopotamian tablets, and they argue that this is pseudoscience. Traditional science states that Anu is the Akkadian name for the god An, who is the supreme deity of Sumerian culture. His name is intertwined with the universal principle and with the supreme deity himself, as the father of the sky or the father of the heavens. Anu is symbolized as a single star, and surprisingly, through the Maltese cross. According to the Sumerians, Akkadians, and Assyrians, these gods, the Anunnaki, are the creators of human beings. The records on the Mesopotamian tablets tell a story that intertwines with that of the Holy Bible, but they provide a much more comprehensive version. The tablets from the Library of Nineveh state that human beings were created by the Anunnaki to replace the heavy labor performed by the lesser gods known as Igigi. After this creation, the lesser gods rest, similar to the biblical God resting on the seventh day. The Bible, specifically in Genesis 1:26, states, "Let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness." This phrase has long been the subject of extensive interpretations, debates, and speculations among theologians, scholars, and enthusiasts alike. It is important to approach this question with a balanced and informed perspective, acknowledging the vast array of viewpoints that exist on this topic. Looking to this plural, we have to question ourselves. Is this a clue to understand the bigger picture? Is there a connection between the biblical God and the Anunnaki? Could we attribute the creation described in the Bible to the Anunnaki gods, those beings revered by the Babylonians? Could the term Anunnaki be the real meaning of the plural behind the name of God in the Bible? It is important to note that the Mesopotamian tablets and the biblical accounts belong to different cultural and religious traditions. While there may be some similarities in the creation narratives, it would be speculative to directly equate the Anunnaki with the deity of the Bible. Nevertheless, we have to consider that the concept of multiple gods and divine beings was prevalent in ancient Mesopotamian cultures, and the Anunnaki were considered a pantheon of gods. In contrast, the God depicted in the Bible is portrayed as a singular, omnipotent deity. Nevertheless, as we could observe during this video, maybe the God of the Bible had been invented, as Thomas Romer states in title of his book, and there is a big reason for that. The patriarch of the monotheistic religions, Abraham, is traditionally understood to have been a citizen of the city of Ur in ancient Sumeria, a bustling metropolis that was one of the first cities in the world and a cradle of human civilization. Ur was an important Sumerian city-state in ancient Mesopotamia, located in the present-day Dekar province in southern Iraq. It was founded in the Ubaid period, approximately 6,500 to 3,800 BC, and was most prosperous in the early Bronze Age, approximately 2,900 to 2,000 BC. Ur was a major hub of Sumerian culture, noted for its advanced architecture, complex social structure, and significant contributions to art and literature. Ur was particularly known for its ziggurat, a massive step pyramid-like structure known as the Great Ziggurat of Ur. The ziggurat was dedicated to the moon god Nana, also known as Sin, the patron deity of Ur. The ziggurat was part of a temple complex that served as an administrative center for the city, as well as a shrine for the god. It was a significant place of worship and was likely used for various ceremonies and rituals. Nana was one of the most important gods in the Sumerian pantheon. He was the god of the moon and was associated with wisdom and divination. Nana was the father of the sun god Utu and the goddess Inanna, who was a central figure in Sumerian mythology and religion. Beyond Nana, the citizens of Ur also revered other gods from the Sumerian pantheon, which included An, the sky god, Enlil, the god of wind and storms, and Ea or Enki, the god of water and wisdom, among others. These deities were part of a complex religious system that formed the basis for Sumerian society and culture. Abraham lived in Ur, and his life would have been shaped by a rich tapestry of Sumerian culture, traditions, and religion, which were suffused with numerous myths and legends. These myths, some of the earliest known to human history, would have been a constant presence in his upbringing, told and retold in community gatherings, family ceremonies, and religious rites. The Sumerians had a polytheistic belief system with a pantheon of deities who controlled various aspects of the natural world and human society. If we interpret the term aliens metaphorically, these deities, with their superhuman powers and often unfathomable motives, could indeed seem alien to human understanding. Given his exposure to these mythological figures, it is indeed plausible that Abraham's understanding of divinity and his eventual conception of a single, all-powerful God were influenced by his early experiences in Ur. However, it's also important to note that the transformation of Abraham's beliefs from polytheism to monotheism represents a significant theological shift that is a cornerstone of Abrahamic religions. This shift would have set him apart from his contemporaries in Sumeria and paved the way for the establishment of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. We may never know what have happened to this gigantic shift in this religious perspective. We may never know if that ancient times have lived among these deities, creatures, or alien beings. The concept of a significant shift in religious perspectives, especially from polytheistic to monotheistic belief systems, is indeed a fascinating topic that has been the subject of much scholarly debate. While we may never definitively know the precise circumstances and influences that led to such a transformation, we can make assumptions based on historical, archaeological, and theological studies. Polytheism was indeed a characteristic of many of the earliest civilizations in human history. Ancient societies such as those of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece, for instance, had complex pantheons of gods and goddesses, each with distinct roles and responsibilities. Over time, some of these societies underwent a transition from polytheism to monotheism, the belief in a single deity. One prominent example of this shift is the ancient Israelites, whose religious traditions are foundational to modern Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As we previously presented, Thomas Romer suggests that the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, is a result of an attempt to unify 2 factions within post-Babylonian exile Judaism: those who returned from exile in Babylon and those who remained in the country. These factions had differing visions, expressed through the tradition of the Jewish patriarchs and that of the Exodus. In this context, the shift from polytheism to monotheism might be seen as part of a larger process of social and religious consolidation. Richard Dawkins, an evolutionary biologist and prominent critic of religion, might argue that the shift from polytheism to monotheism can be understood in the context of the evolution of ideas, or memes, a term he coined. Dawkins suggests that ideas evolve and spread in a manner analogous to biological evolution. Thus, the shift to monotheism might be seen as the result of the survival of the fittest among religious ideas. Perhaps because monotheism offered certain social or psychological advantages that helped it spread and persist. However, it's important to note that the transition from polytheism to monotheism was not a universal phenomenon. Many societies around the world maintained and continue to maintain polytheistic belief systems. Moreover, some societies developed other religious structures entirely, such as animism, the belief that all objects and creatures possess spiritual essence, or ancestor worship. This may lead us forcibly to a very curious idea. The idea that perhaps a deity or one of these ancient aliens proclaimed themselves as the one and only for a people, for certain cities, and for some individuals. And so, these people began to worship and confuse them with the almighty creator of the universe. Another possibility in this regard is that maybe a group of these deities, or more specifically, these ancient aliens or the ancient astronauts themselves, identified and associated themselves through a symbol, a name, a hymn, and thus they gained a group of humans who worshipped and revered them. Regardless of the path we observe, we come to the end of this documentary with one certainty. And I want to make it clear that this certainty is my certainty. The certainty that I have recorded in my 2 books, which are currently only available in Portuguese, but will soon be translated into English. The certainty that the grand architect of the universe is not closely connected to any of the revered deities from our distant and ancient past. And in this case, the Bible and other sacred books, as well as other myths, exclusively address these ancient aliens. And as for God's judgment, what could we say? Well, perhaps we could consider him guilty since he caused and allowed so many deaths. At least this deity identified in the Old Testament. However, we need to analyze it more deeply and then absolve this kind of deity of blame. The stains of the past cannot be erased, those from that ancient and distant past. But after that, it was ourselves, as humanity, who decided to perpetuate this name and these atrocities that stain the pages of our history with the blood of innocence, and always in the name of God. The true culprit, then, is us humans. I hope that we, as humans ourselves, can cleanse ourselves of all the dirt that we ourselves decided to build in our past. May the light of knowledge and wisdom illuminate our lives and ideas. And may the light of truth illuminate our bodies and make our spirits vibrate in search of our true spiritual liberation. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, leave your comment, and share it with friends and family who might be interested in the subject. See you in one of the other videos here on the channel.